everyone, welcome back. A little bit of a change up today as we are going to be looking at Transformers again, but not exactly the toys. We're going to be looking at a UK issue of the comic series run. Now, the American side and the British side kind of differ on two levels here. The first being the presentation of the UK comic book, which is basically known in America as prestige format. What prestige format is basically a larger comic book split into multiple parts of different stories from other American books. Kind of split up to make that book in the UK last longer and would be on a rather faster pace of release, so either weekly or bi-weekly instead of monthly. I first discovered Transformers not through the Generation 1 cartoon, although I did find that on VHS in video stores. My first intake of it was through the Marvel UK's division comic books. Now, Transformers alone wasn't the only title to get the prestige format, as the X-Men cartoon, the Batman animated series cartoon, and a lot of the other split-offs from that, like the Fantastic Four, Hulk, Superman animated series spun out of that. So a lot of DC and Marvel was still in prestige format right up until the mid to late 90s, when that kind of died out. The reason that died out is pretty much that the market for distribution got a hell of a lot better, and American comics were starting to be seen in not only newsstands but also comic book stores and stores like Forbidden Planet, which could supply a steady stream continually of those books. The distribution in the early 90s for American titles straight to newsstands wasn't exactly great, so I'd say pick up issue 18 of Generation X one week and then an issue of X-Men another week, because they didn't have the next issue of Generation X. Good times, good times. Basically, what the prestige format and the Marvel UK division did was continually give us a steady stream of continual stories in an easy to digest format, much quicker and cheaper. Where a lot of, say, the titles like Batman and Superman, the X-Men or Spider-Man were straight up reprints of American titles, Transformers did something a little bit different. During the course of its early run, the writer Simon Furman started creating stories specifically for the UK issues in order to fill in gaps from the American title, which was kind of a genius idea, but also presented some problems. Like, for instance, the creation of Goldbug from Bumblebee, or say, twin clones of Galvatron and Optimus Prime. Characters also that hadn't met each other yet, who would meet each other later on, or vice versa, meaning that either in the UK stories or the American titles they didn't know each other yet, but they should have known each other if the UK issues were supposed to be filling in the gaps for the American issues. Now, the UK book is a bit of an odd duck, to say the least, because while reprinting all the American stories and fitting in UK-only stories into that continuity, much like the Japanese show did for Generation 1 after it had finished, there was still not really great sales towards the end of the 90s, and by 1992 the UK book had printed its last issue, finishing off the American run of the comic. The UK comic did run for 5 issues of Generation 2, with the first 2 issues being UK written stories and drawn, but the other 3 issues picking up with the American comic. Yeah, this is why there isn't a lot of videos about the UK comic book on YouTube that I found. It's very scarcely talked about because of it's so confusing. Confusing, yes, but not to say there isn't any love for those UK stories, as a lot of people in my age, in their mid-30s, grew up reading these, and they're great. The Big Shutdown and today's story we're going to be getting into, good stories. Now, the creative team for the UK book for much of its run was Simon Furman, who wrote and edited most of the books, and on art, Jeff Senior, which, yes, I know I am butchering that name. Jeff Sr. drew the pencils for the American Transformers run from issue 62 as first part of the Matrix Quest storyline to issue 75, the ending to the Unicron storyline, and the main issue that most American fans may remember the most, as it was the biggest issue since the Underbase saga, but again, that is a story for another day. Most UK Transformers fans will recognise Jeff Sr.'s artwork instantly, as he was one of the predominant artists in the book. Jeff Sr.'s period of artwork ranged from issue 42 all the way up to 247 in the UK book, and numerous cover art. He began in the UK issues in December of 1985 before moving on to the American title in November of 1989, as by most of that time, all the UK storylines had pretty much wrapped up and now was just reprinting American issues. So either way, his art was still in the book, it was just being distributed by 2 different countries. Jeff Sr. is possibly my favourite Transformers artist, period. His work is so good and to me instantly recognisable as Transformers artwork, much in the same way for me that Norm Brayfogle is iconically connected with Batman and Jim Lee with his early X-Men work. It's hard to pin down exactly why I like Jeff Sr.'s artwork for Transformers so much. It's a combination of pliability yet boxiness of the nature of the characters he draws with such expressive faces, and they're not all just left with dull, generic, dull surprise faces. I'm looking at you, Dreamwave. Now, Simon Furman, on the other hand, is one of those writers that has pretty much stuck with Transformers consistently throughout the years, even into the IDW days. And he's one of those writers that kind of is a bit controversial. Yeah. Writing style for characters like RC aside, and known for his things like Furmanisms, he's a pretty much solid writer for Transformers, especially in the early days, as there is definitely some love and thought put into some of these stories that are meant to bridge the gaps between the American issues and also expand on some things, as we'll see in the book. So I guess after that rather longer than normal introductory part, I'm gonna have to jump into Transformers, so why not? We jump into Optimus Prime wandering the wasteland of a desolated planet, Cybertron. He comes across a fellow Autobot, Outback, who, if you saw the original cartoon, was Australian. So yeah, apparently Cybertron has hemispheres and has an Australia. Does that also mean that Australia was formed the same way Cybertron from our planet, which basically means Outback is a descendant of people that were put into prison? What? He cannot believe how much it has changed. His homeworld, his beloved Cybertron, is now a desolate metal wasteland, its sky polluted by the stench of 1,000 battles. Towering cities have been leveled. Once proud Autobots ground beneath the boot of oppression, this is not the world he once knew. Some things, however, never change. Like jackals, you Decepticons prey on the weak or the small. Who? Perhaps you would try your luck with me. And here we get the title page of The Harder They Die, or I guess you could say, Die Hard? No. Sorry. Ha! You're big enough to teach me the error of my ways, eh? Well, forget it. In my experience, the bigger they are, the harder they die. It has certainly been so in my experience. I, who have seen my Autobot brethren fall around me, have cheated death on more than one occasion. This warped good fortune of mine just ran out. Optimus Prime tries to help Outback from the random Decepticon and gets blasted back in the face for his troubles. Ah, curse you! His Decepticon enemies have grown powerful in his absence, while he, it would seem, has grown careless. While Optimus Prime recovers from the blast to the face, which, let's be honest, that had to hurt, just maybe a tiny bit, he is confronted with Outback. You alright? Yes, it seems the damage to my optical sensors was only the Decepticon. Relax. That was some throw. And I know it doesn't make it clear in the artwork, but that spike was there initially, but From the layout, it looks like it's part of the floor, or at least that's how it looked to me. I'm Outback. Thanks for the save. Prime. Optimus Prime. Must resist urge to make James Bond joke. You're kidding. The Optimus Prime? I thought you were long dead. No. We survived. Our craft, the Ark, crash-landed on a distant planet called Earth. Earth. The word summons visions of his adopted homeworld and his fellow Autobots, who undoubtedly now also believe him slain. Visions of their discovery of the shattered remains of his facsimile construct, a near-perfect replica of himself built by his chief engineer, Wheeljack. Visions of Wheeljack, himself with no evidence of survival. Will he too believe the worst? Visions of a Decepticon that, to his never-ending regret, has succeeded beyond his wildest imaginings to all his intents and purposes. Optimus Prime is dead. I had originally intended to fake my death so that my troops would learn to function without me. Now, unless I can find a way to return to Earth, they will have to. So basically, you was going to fake your own death to trick your troops into thinking you were dead in order to get them to function better without you. Seriously, you could have just taken a weekend off, or stepped back, or just stayed in the Ark, or done any number of things apart from fake your own death. Does anyone see how stupid this is? So your first instinct was to build or have built an exact duplicate which Wheeljack knows exists, yet believes you're dead. If he thinks you're dead, where does he think the duplicate has gone? Go now, Outback. There are things I must do alone. We see a very good silent moment of Outback transforming and silently, seemingly following Optimus Prime in the background before we switch over. Now it's time to catch up with our old pal Megatron. Meanwhile, somewhere across Cybertron in the region known as Polyhex. Magnificent! I am pleased to see that Decepticon standards have not slackened in my absence. The Autobot army is a shambles, their cities are in ruins, and their will to fight almost extinguished. Most satisfying. A pity, really, that you are in no condition to savour your, and the Decepticons' greatest victory. Have a care with your tone, Megatron. Though you may lead the Decepticons on Earth, I rule here. All that you have brought with you on your return to Cybertron is trouble. The last thing we need here now, with the Autobot resistance movement searching for a figurehead, is Optimus Prime. Silence! I will deal with Optimus Prime in due course, but not perhaps before I have dealt with you, Megatron. Ha! I notice that so far you seem to have had remarkably little success on your score. His presence on Cybertron now is yet more evidence of your failure. That was not my fault! I was betrayed! I had him. He was beaten helpless. It had only remained for the thrice-cursed Predacons to finish the job. A task Razorclaw and Rampage seemed eager to carry out. Too eager, as it turned out. Their initial leap took them clear of Prime, and a second took them away into the forest. My momentary shock allowed Tantrum and Headstrong to stun me, and Dive Bomb to make off with my fusion cannon. To cut this a little shorter, Megatron exposits more of how he ended up in this situation and how he can't really trust Shockwave, and he thinks that he's responsible for his current misfortunes. It also seems that those pouches on the sides of his legs are not just for aesthetic purposes, but also carry weapons. He exposits how he tracks Prime down through the forest and finds him alone, open and exposed. And yeah, vulnerable. He shoots Optimus Prime and kills him. But I was duped. It seems what I destroyed was a facsimile construct. There was no time to wonder why Prime had been carrying an exact duplicate of himself around with him. I had more pressing concerns. We see Optimus Prime and Megatron struggle for a moment before Megatron activates a space bridge. And a space bridge right now in the comics is an actual bridge, which deviates a little bit from what the cartoon showed, but yeah, this was a thing for a while, and they eventually do change it to more in line with the cartoon. But it's weird. It's UK comics, man. As I survived, I must also assume that Prime also lives. We were lucky. If used without care, that bridge could cause untold damage. As I'm sure you know, Straxus? So yeah, Straxus is back, and he's basically a head in a jar. Straxus was killed by Blaster in issue 18 of the American comic run, and seemingly brought back here as said head in a jar. And here's now where I prefer the Decepticons. They have a much more varied and diverse array of leaders. And yes, leaders. That doesn't mean the Autobots don't usually, but it's either relegated to either Optimus Prime or Rodimus Prime, maybe Star Saber at a push. But they're not to say they're other leaders, it's just more they are chosen to be leaders. The Decepticons, however, are treacherous by nature and have a lot more power struggle in their ranks, so to speak. Don't believe me? Well, there is Galvatron, Megatron, Scorponok, Skystalker, Ratbat, Bludgeon, Shockwave, G-Axis, Straxus, Devil Z, Overlord, Starscream. And that's just from the top of my head. And not to say there aren't more, because evidently there will be, and people will be commenting down below. But yeah, there's a lot more internal power struggle within their ranks, meaning there's a lot more leader types that rise up and try and take control. And before anyone says anything, yes, G-Axis does count as a Decepticon. He is a bad guy in Generation 2, and therefore he is one of them. I don't care if he doesn't call himself a Decepticon, he is a Decepticon. But Straxus is and always will be my favourite obscure Decepticon leader, as he's such a presence on paper, especially with Jeff Senior's artwork. It adds a real creepy vibe, much in the same way as a mad scientist is. His appearance here is also a nice callback or future callback to how Megatron ended up in the first season of Transformers Animated, as basically just a head. That's Lord Straxus to you. Even though, thanks to the Autobot Blaster, I am forced to endure this mockery of life. Provoke me, and you will find I am still a formidable adversary. Calm yourself, Straxus. You have nothing to fear from me. And Prime does? Oh yes. You see, I have passed word through your known informants within the Decepticon ranks that the Autobot resistance, telling of a brazen Decepticon trying to infiltrate their movement. A Decepticon designed to resemble in every detail their missing hero, Optimus Prime. I won't need to kill my greatest enemy. The Autobots will do it for me. We now switch back to Optimus Prime, who has reached the main city of Iacon, and things aren't exactly going great for him. Iacon, no! I had hoped, prayed, that the capital city-state had been spared. It seems impossible to believe that any Autobots inhabit it. I just hope I can find... And with a big chang sound effect, Optimus Prime is hit from behind by Rack and Ruin. Rack and Ruin are their own thing, and hopefully I'll get to talk about more of the UK characters, Wreckers, and all of that kind of stuff later on, but it's good to see him pop up here. What? An Autobot? Or perhaps Autobots? But why did you attack me? Don't you recognize me? I'm Optimus Prime. Gah! And another well-placed thock, meaning Optimus Prime gets hit in the back of the head yet again. With all these whacks to the head just within this issue, I'm starting to understand why Optimus Prime makes certain decisions in the Transformers that really don't make sense as a leader. Like, he's got a lot of head trauma. And in the next panel, we see what has smacked him from behind. A Guardian unit, but different. Wait, there must be some error here. In the following two panels, we basically see Optimus Prime get smashed into the floor and passes out. And before we move on a minute, Hasbro, where was this toy as a kid, or even now? Like, a Guardian unit would really sell well. Make one! For long, pleasant moments, his mind wanders once more through the glowing golden streets of Iacon. His world is at peace. He remembers a time when his thoughts turned only to life, never to death. But as consciousness drags him screaming from his past, he realizes with dreadful certainty that has all changed. And in the final large panel at the bottom, we see Ultra Magnus, Sandstorm, Springer, Roadbuster, Rack and Ruin, the Guardian unit, and who I can assume is Kup, the Wreckers. Decepticon, the charges are spying and impersonating our greatest warrior. The verdict of this court is guilty. The sentence is death, and the Wreckers will be only too pleased to carry it out. This comic, for all its faults, is quite short, which is par for the course with British prestige format. You only get a small sliver of a bigger story, but it's not bad. Aside from how short the story is, it's actually pretty good. And yes, there's some time taken up with what happened previously in previous issues to get to this point in the story, but the story itself within the issue progresses further than you might assume, especially with the big reveal that Straxus is alive. Megatron's plan here is actually really brilliant and utilizes the Autobots in a way that their namesake is. They're Decepticons. They will deceive, they will lie, and they will cheat in order to win. And it being Megatron, he doesn't care that he doesn't get to kill Optimus Prime himself. He just wants to be the one that orchestrated the plan to kill him. So yeah, not a toy as such, but still nostalgic, and one of the reasons that I personally got into the Transformers in the first place. Apart from also things like the UK annuals, I had the 1987 and 1991, and they really did pull me in and hook me in as a forever fan. So the comic did something right. So yeah, thanks for joining me down that little road trip down memory lane. It's a bit of a longer video than normal, but par with the course with comics. I'm wondering what I can do next though. Something nostalgic yet toy related. I don't know. Something maybe mighty? So, small box Toy Scourge here. Thanks for watching the video. Like, share, subscribe if you want to see more Transformers or retro toy content. I'm going to put a little video next to me somewhere of some recent finds that I found in the local Walmart. Stay cool and see you later, nerds.